So what is this whole spark thing? You
Mm.
see it a lot. That keep the spark alive.
We
We
lost the
lost our
spark.
spark. You know,
Yeah.
what is it
Mm.
to you?
Well, I remember when I first thought or realized that our relationship changed. So the first year, there was just this like constant desire for each other all the time. And I
Mm,
remember we were like kissing so much and we were like always really cuddly. And I think when, you suggesting like, oh, let's cook something on Saturday morning, that would be like the best thing that I could ever do on that day. Like
mm.
nothing else mattered.
Beautiful food.
It's just like the fact, like just going to a supermarket
Yeah.
and back, like just the most mundane things in life,
Yeah, super
just were like
powerful.
super amazing, That
Yeah.
was like a whole year in our relationship where just like anything was just epic, This is kind of this it's almost also like a little well, it's an interesting reality because I think if couples would stay in that reality, they would probably lose all their friends.
Yeah, they lose their friends. They'd probably burn out. They would probably just,
So
have
interesting.
quite a lot of bladder infections with all the love making.
So yeah, I remember we probably made love every day, more or less, and I did actually have bladder infections.
Yeah,
So, however, that was also due to other unhealthy lifestyle choices.
completely.
um, yes. So my point is, we had a year of this called honeymoon phase,
Honeymoon.
or the spark was strong, right? The
Mm,
spark was hot, and then it changed. And I remember it kind of worrying me because I was like, first of all, there's a grieving of like, oh, but that was what a way to live life, It's just this love that doesn't need anyone or anything else in the world. That feels so powerful. And how I started to appreciate the spark again was that I realized when I would be looking at you in many little moments during the day or, during the week, that I still felt this like really strong love. I was just like,
mm,
wow, I love this person so much. And it was a different feeling than this desire that was there before of just,
yeah.
wanting to be intimate and I guess like a sexual desire. That was changing.
Yeah. So let's stay on this spark element. So what kind of feelings were there? Can you like describe it? Maybe I'll go first actually. So for me, like the spark, the sensation of the feelings is that classic like falling in love feeling, whatever that is to any individual. It's
Mm.
that it's the butterflies, it's the anticipation, the excitement. I think there's an element of excitement, like you said, of like cooking breakfast and being like excited about that. Or like you would be like, oh, I'm gonna go do that. And I would be like, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's do that together. And everything seems so amazing when, yeah. And I think that feeling comes from the newness and the freshness, the novelty of it, which is pretty powerful.
Mm.
Does that kind of resonate with you in terms of what a spark is and how does it feel?
Yeah, I think the spark for me is like this connection where you look at each other and it like makes you feel a lot.
Yeah.
Right? It's just like that. I don't have that necessarily with other people I
You don't
love
have it
really
with friends,
deeply.
do you? No.
I don't have the same situation, yeah, with a good friend. Not that, some people have that and that's amazing. But in, I guess, yeah, like your standard relationship model, you don't share that with friends. And it's, it makes this connection like something magical and special that you can just look at each other. And there's a secret also that is shared in that moment of like, the other person feels the same and
Mm.
there is a current running between you.
Do you think it's sexual then? Primarily sexual? Do you think it's like a sexual chemistry type thing?
I believe it must be sexual because w- with my friends, I also have these moments of being like, only we two know what's just been said. And it feels really like it's a really strong bond of just like hearing a joke and knowing exactly why we laugh, or
Yeah.
making like just a slight remark and that being hilarious because it refers to something that was 10 years ago. So it's like there's also this shared reality and this strong bond, and just like
But you can have a spark. Well, I've had sparks with friends that have been asexual, where it's like I meet someone and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I wonder what they're doing. Oh, that's so fascinating. Yeah, I just want to be in their presence. Is that kind of a spark for you as well? Or do you feel that? Like when you meet someone new and then they're just like really fascinating and there's not really like a sexual desire to it, but there's like,
also a honeymoon phase.
yeah, honeymoon. You're like, wow, tell me more about that. And then you both reveal how much baggage you have, and it's like, oh, okay.
And then they come the parts of the person that kind of trigger you, or like feel like something sometimes irritating. Yeah, I definitely had that with some people for sure. But I think with like long-term friendships, there is definitely this moment of just knowing each other so well, which is like there is an energy behind that as well. When I compare that to our relationship, I say it's different because my body reacts differently.
Yeah.
Because if there's sexual energy between two people, it kind of activates me.
Yeah.
And it makes me feel so alive, right? Like if you, yesterday, for example, in the elevator, when you're like pulling, it's just a play of just like, oh, the cliche, we're alone in the elevator. But it makes me feel a lot in my body,
Yeah.
like, poof. And I think that's where the word spark comes from, because it's electric.
Yes. Yeah.
So for me, a spark means there's like a energetic current activated or running, or
Yeah.
like a flame igniting in a moment of just like,
Yeah.
boom.
And the interesting thing about that, because when you really think about what it's called, the spark, then, and you think about what sparks are, it's just a flash of light.
Mm-hmm.
And so by definition of what it is, it fades.
Mm-hmm.
It goes away. Well, it doesn't fade, it just goes away. It starts strong, boom, and then disappears.
Yeah, it's moments of intensity.
Moments of intensity.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then it's thinking about, so the idea of keeping the spark alive, does that even make sense?
Well, I see what you're coming from, but you want like perpetual sparks.
Yeah.
You don't want the source of the spark to stop. So it's like you want continuously have moments of intensity in your relationship.
Yeah.
You feel like a rapture of, wow, this is like, nothing else exists. Nothing matters right now, which is also, I find, one of the biggest gifts of intimacy, when there is this moment where time is almost either stands still or changes, almost like timelessness in a way. Yeah.
But it could be because if it is a spark and you need a spark to start a fire, so perhaps it's having your spark to then start your fire between us as a couple, or between couples. Because you see a lot of people that don't survive as in relationships past the honeymoon phase.
Yeah, it's a make or break.
And they like fail to ignite the fire, which can potentially burn forever, as fires can do if they have enough good stuff going into them and have all the right conditions.
That's a really beautiful way of putting it. It's like, don't cry about your spark, just like
Build your fire.
build a fire.
So how do you build a fire? How did we build a fire? Have we built a fire?
I say I was pretty sure, kind of like 3 years into the relationship, 4 years, if I didn't went on like a really deep healing of my sexual traumas and things, relational baggage, that it would have been quite difficult to keep the fire burning.
Yeah. Do you want to go into that more?
Yeah, I think I believe that conscious sexuality and conscious sexuality, for some people sacred sexuality, is a really, really great pathway to keep a fire between two people. Because if there's no energy and consciousness and love pour towards intimacy, that's like the main, not the main maybe, but one of the biggest things that really easily nourishes the fire. Because if I have a beautiful connection with you, intimate connection, and we're almost like ceremonially like blessing that connection through pleasure. Pleasure is so powerful, right? So we are sharing our love and we're adding the element of pleasure and sexual energy connection. We're reaffirming our bond every time
Yeah.
in the most powerful way, right? That
Yeah.
for me, it's like what I love to explain to my clients is like when you are having intimacy and you're exchanging sexual energy and you are aware of the principles of sex magic, where our mind is so much more susceptible to our intentions, to changing our beliefs, to forming our reality when we activate sexual energy, right? We can manifest better when we are adding sexual energy. And then there's obviously the esoteric component of like connection between earth and heavens.
Yeah.
But just on a brain science way, right? It's a fact that our neuroplasticity is so much higher when we're in pleasure. So every time as a couple you're in pleasure and you're directing your thoughts towards this other person with this admiration and love and devotion or surrender, you're affirming those qualities in your relationship.
Yeah.
And in a way, you're doing your own sex magic and making your relationship stronger, more loving, lasting, all the
Yeah.
things that people desire from their relationships. You can manifest them if you choose to in your sexual connection.
Yeah. Yeah. I really like where you're going with this. I also would like to rewind a little bit because when you were talking about um, there were things that you had to work through, I kind of want to focus a little bit more on that because I think that's interesting to see and to explore more because you kind of positioned it as like a make or break moment.
Yeah.
And maybe you could share more if you feel comfortable about some of those blockages that were there that you had to work through to help us be where we are now.
I just want to clarify the make or break was for me after the honeymoon period, there's a make or break point. I think if we wouldn't have sorted out together to have this beautiful sex life, I don't know where our relationship would have went,
True.
but we could have still be together and just like a couple that doesn't really share much intimacy or has
That's also
frustration
possibility.
around their sex life, but
Yeah.
they still love each other so much and have so many other amazing areas that they share that they're still like a really happy couple. I wanted to say that sex life is obviously not the only thing that makes
No.
two people keep the spark and be really happy. However, I believe it's a really powerful, almost like not shortcut, but a really direct way. And when we look at sex life, like I'm going to go into the blocks that I had in a moment. It's not just about having desire for each other and then having intimacy. It's a reflection of so many other parts of our psyche, right? If there's resentment about someone never doing the dishes, it's going to show in the sex life. So I just wanted to mention that the sex life is not just that singular thing. It's influenced by the whole relationship, by everything that the couple does.
Yeah, like, we can't, basically a rule of thumb is you can't separate anything and view it in isolation.
So when we were going out the first year, it was a really big shift for me in how I experienced myself in intimacy. I was, for some reason, I was giving up that pleaser for the beginning of our relationship. I was not trying to impress you or perform or be a certain way. So I felt we had that gave a lot of space for really pure and slow and attuned sexuality between us, because I was more in my body and less in your head, trying to see the interaction from your side, being like, oh, how can I please Patrick? So that was a really big game changer because I felt so safe with you, but didn't do any of that. So I just remember this intense experience of just feeling safe. I wouldn't have called it that way back then because I didn't have that kind of vocabulary. It wouldn't have been something I said. But looking back, I know I felt really, really safe. And then once the honeymoon phase was over, somehow what crept in, which is something I see with so many of my clients, is this feeling of obligation. It's like, oh, if we want to keep this relationship fresh and if we want to have a wonderful relationship, somehow I need to make sure that there is enough sex provided. And because genuinely the assumption, oh, men can kind of like always go for it, it's like, yeah, if I don't provide the sex, saying like, I don't respond when you want it, or I don't initiate when we haven't had any in a long time, then where is this gonna go, right? Like that was something that I had in my mind. And I started even counting like, oh, did we have sex twice this week or just once? Oh my God, did we just have one time? Oh, then it's really time now.
Yeah, I remember when you voiced that, and I was, it kind of surprised me a little bit that you were keeping track like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, okay, yeah, I suppose we haven't had sex in 2 weeks, and you were like, oh my God, this is wrong. And I was like, well,
It's going downhill.
it's going downhill. But I do remember saying that like it's not about the quantity, it's about the quality. And kind of reassuring you that I would rather have sex really well and really good and really passionate, really intimate, less often than more times that was kind of like
A chore.
Pardon?
That would be a chore because
That would be a chore.
yeah, like
Yeah.
you'd rather have that passionate connection than a connection that comes from
Yeah.
me thinking, oh, we kind of have to.
Yeah. Likewise.
Yeah, I remember you saying that, and I also remember it didn't really change much for me.
Yeah.
Even though I totally believed you, I still felt that internal pressure of being able to respond with arousal when you were aroused, for example. You know, if you would approach me and kiss me, in my head I would already be like, oh, can I match this? And that was a pattern that I had my whole life, really, of always the moment in a relationship there would be a strong desire from male partner. Usually it's in most cases as a woman it's hard to match it at that point because we just take longer. So I'm kind of already in a rush, I'm already in a disadvantage, I'm already kind of catching my own tail trying to get there. And then I also realized at that point that there was actually a lot of numbness, and that was also something I was aware my whole life that, you know, I used to have no orgasms. I used to fake orgasms probably for a decade. And I stopped faking orgasms when we were going out, which is a true groundbreaking change. But I slowly was exposed to more and more education around female sexuality, and I realized, oh fuck, even though I'm enjoying sex so much more than I used to as a teenager and, you know, in my early 20s, I still am so far away from what's the potential.
Yeah.
And that was amazing to hear and understand, but it also made me feel even more shit about myself.
Yeah.
So it added to the layer of shutdown of like, oh, I'm also I don't only have to provide this sex thing, I also actually don't like it as much as I could. Yeah, I'm not enjoying it as much as other women would. So some I must be like broken. Like
so there was two kind of blockages so far that you've mentioned. One was the obligation of providing or keeping, like pleasing your man, I suppose. And the other one was actually the realization that sex wasn't as good as it could be. Let's just say that wasn't as pleasurable as it could be.
Yeah. And the pleasure gap of like, oh, for you it being so easy to have an orgasm, whereas for me being this like marathon to get there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of like there's already a bit of a like an unequal situation going in, that pleasure gap between the two of us where, yeah, you would need a lot more time. And in general, most women do. And for me, it was quite very almost spontaneous how it could just spring into action and also be at a point of climax within minutes, really.
And that's describing like a real massive problem and conditioning in society. And that's why it wasn't enough for you to tell me, oh, but I'm not bothered, you know, I
Yeah.
don't feel this pressure for us to have sex X amount of times.
Mm,
And I'd rather just want you to be, you know, true in your in the connection than like in your head about
yeah.
obligation.
And that's a really interesting point because it really shows and highlights the pressure that couples and individuals are under just from societal constructs of what something is and what something isn't. And especially within our Western society, there is definitely a view of sexuality that is very scripted, is a narrative. And whether we like it or not, we've kind of been brought up in this kind of narrative of what is, and that really affects how we engage with each other
Mm.
massively.
Yeah, I wanted to get more into what this societal narrative or conditioning is, and that's, you've been comparing our arousal. You've been saying, oh, I'm quite like this, and you're like most women, slower. And what I see is that many women realize at some point when they compare themselves to their male partners that they're not working the same way than their male partners, therefore they must be broken. So this is the irony of the situation, because the standard of how sexuality should look like is how male sexuality looks like, because we've seen it a million times in porn and in Hollywood movies. It's always spontaneous, really passionate. It's from 0 to 100 in no time. And yeah, everyone's ready right away and like pulling each other through the kitchen, onto the wall, into the bedroom. And
It's a patriarchal narrative of sex.
oh, definitely. And it's a very male centered. So these women, like myself, compare themselves to that idea, that one singular story of how arousal can look like for some people in some moments. And they realize, oh, this doesn't apply to me, therefore I must be broken.
Yeah.
Where in reality, what they've observed is the fact that they don't have a penis and balls. Congratulations.
Yeah.
You're not a man, you're a woman.
Exactly. And it's comparing their own arousal network to a male arousal network, which are on opposite ends of the spectrum of how they function and how they operate. So there's 3 points here of the challenges of keeping the spark alive after the honeymoon period was fizzling out between us, and that was the obligation. It was also the pleasure gap between both of us, of you not having as much pleasure, or you're not having the potential in which you could have, and then also the pressure from societal norms that dictate the sexual script within the bedroom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so limiting.
And so if we're if we're looking at, okay, these are 3 of the big challenges that were there, what was some of the ways that because it wasn't just you, so it was us as a relationship, were dealing with this situation?
Yeah. For me, it brought me onto a big tantric quest. Because I was like, there has to be more. And then once there was these little breadcrumbs to different teachings, different information. And yeah, it was really, really fascinating. At the same time, also it revealed like the underlying reasons for not feeling pleasure.
Yeah.
So most of my clients, and including myself, when there is not much pleasure, it means there's numbness. And when there's numbness, it means our body has decided that whatever happened there was too painful to be felt. Therefore, numbness is the better option.
Yeah, it creates an armor.
So if we want to let go of this armor to feel more, we also have to feel what's underneath, why this armor has been created in the first place.
And it's usually something tender.
Yes, and that can be quite challenging. And so I guess we even had phases, the more I got into my sexual healing, the more we had phases where we had like no sex, and it was so healing for me.
Yeah.
I remember we had like 3 months, I think, where on purpose we chose not to have any sex because it was such a big process for me to remove this feeling of pressure.
Yeah.
And to get into my head the moment we would start
Yeah.
kiss.
And that's the best thing about it, because these like small nuggets are like just where it's at. Like when I work with a lot of men and they're like, trying to navigate having sex with their partners, usually my number one advice at the beginning is like, stop trying to have sex. Just take it off the table.
It's like
Change what you're thinking about, whatever the sex thing is, and just focus on something else for a while. Take away the pressure.
Yeah. Because sex happens automatically when we have pleasure and we feel connected.
Yeah.
So why would we focus on the outcome? You know, it's like trying to climb a mountain and you're like super frustrated that you're not at the top, but you haven't started walking yet.
Yeah.
It's like, why am I not up there?
Or like when you go on these big mountain hikes and you're like walking through the forest and it's by the river and the birds are there and it's super peaceful, and you're not enjoying that moment because you're too fixated trying to get to the top. And getting to the top, it's all right, but when you really think about it, it's maybe not as good as walking by the river on the forest floor beneath the mountain.
Yeah.
So I think for us and for me, I think one big shift was just redefining what sex is. And that was really important because we had this kind of, the mindset that sex is penetration. Penis and vagina, lovemaking.
Yeah, that's reproduction.
That's reproduction. Yeah.
If you choose so.
If you choose to do that. And so changing what sex represented was a big deal, because it's like, instead of, you were right, going on what you said there, instead of focusing on this outcome, which might have been an ejaculatory orgasm, it was focusing on like, why do I want to have sex? And a lot of the reasons why I want to have sex is to feel connection and to feel love, to feel seen, and to tap into primal energy.
Yeah.
And these are real big like drives for me. And then when I'm looking at that, it's like, well, actually, no, the ejaculatory orgasm feels good, but it's not actually like the main reason why I want to have it. And so if that's the case, I can achieve a lot of these things, the connection, the primal energy, the being seen, through other forms of intimacy, like cuddling, massaging, eye gazing. And a lot of these are actually done in tantric practices. And I think that was a real big moment for us, when we could realize we could get a lot of what we needed, we could be fulfilled, and not actually need to focus on putting a penis into a vagina.
Yeah. That really reminds me of the principles of yin and yang teachings about sexual arousal, right? We've both studied a lot in the Taoist lineages, and you can't have the outcome of the peak experience, which is very yang, without nurturing the yin. And so many people want to have yang arousal because that's what we see in the movies and porn. It's this fiery experience.
Yeah.
But you can't have the fire if you don't bring the wood and the kindling, and you build the right conditions, and you care for the perfect spot. And so you want a lot of that yin connection as well. And that's all the things you mentioned right now. If we want to have a really amazing fire, like how we get there is all these practices where we are playing with sexual energy, but in a really unexcited way.
Yeah.
In a very slow and goalless and relaxed way. So
Yeah.
the more relaxed connection, the more relaxed sexual arousal we have, which means there is maybe a little tingling for one or for both
Yeah.
of us in that cuddle or in that kiss or in that touch or in that eye gazing or
Mm-hmm.
energy exchange. That is all building the capacity and also kind of, yeah, it builds more sexual energy basically between
Yeah.
us. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cultivates it.
And that's the energy that is really beautiful to have and also sustainable, because you can build that sexual energy for like weeks
Yeah.
and it's not a peak and then a drop.
Yeah.
So I think in terms of this, what you were mentioning there, it kind of reminds me what is actually the differences between desire
Mhm.
that have kind of been more in the sex positive conversation of late about responsive desire and spontaneous desire.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important thing to consider because, you know, we say spark, but when I speak to other people and clients and stuff, they're like, I'm worried that there's no more desire anymore. So
Yeah.
desire is also another kind of synonym for the spark and
Yeah.
stuff like this. And it's, yeah, there is true. The spark in itself can be seen as like this spontaneous desire where, you know, you're doing something and then all of a sudden your partner comes in and you look at them and you're like, yeah. And you're drawn to them and you give them this like hypnotic eyes and they look at you and they drop their shopping bag and like an egg breaks and it doesn't matter and she stamps on another egg and you're like, and then all of a sudden you clap and some tango music comes on and you're having sex on the couch,
Exactly.
you know, wow. Um, but in reality, because that might happen at certain times. But that is also like a movie script. Come on, it's so easy for me to say that because
Yeah.
that is how
Seen it so many
intimacy
times.
is just done in movies, you know, and that's why it's there, and that's the sexual narrative that is imprinted on us. But that's spontaneous, and that comes out of nowhere. But like as most relationships, and our relationships is definitely the same, like true of it, is this responsive desire of like, let's do something and see if that creates desire.
Yeah.
And let's do something can be anything depending on your relationship. You know, it can be, and that's the best thing. You have to like really check in and see what your relationship's like. For us, a go-to one is just soft touch.
Yeah.
Let's lie on the bed, give each other some cuddles, some touches, and perhaps desire comes from that.
I also really love, um, we had a while where we gave each other these really slow genital massages where it was just like a meditation.
Yeah.
And it's 15 minutes, and afterwards, often, that's again like the yin arousal. If you do that, you're relaxed, and then you just let it go. Everyone, goes about their day with a
Yeah.
bit more sexual energy in their bodies. And these kind of things, yeah, it's just so liberating when there is no expectation
Yeah.
for anything to go anywhere, because then desire can really flourish, because desire for what,
Yeah.
So we're taking away this really narrow path that the desire always has to be a desire for penetration or a certain way of having intimacy, where in reality there might be a desire to do the same thing again and like do it longer, or to I have a desire to kiss you 20 minutes later when I see you, because we just shared this really intimate moment. So it kind of like builds naturally in this flow that cultivates more and more connection and love and intimacy.
Yeah, because it really is that. It's the cultivation. It's the cultivation. So I really liked how you said about changing expectations. I think that's massive. Because even, yeah, for me as well, I'm guilty of saying, shall we have sex later? And you're definitely guilty of that as well. It's like, should we be intimate later? And for me, yeah, sometimes it's like, yes. And other times it's like, shut down. I get worried that I need to perform, that I need to please, I need to do stuff. I need this
You
obligation.
need to be up
I
for it.
need.
Yeah.
And I'm like, whoa, that's like, and I'm like, oh yeah, maybe. Got a bit of a headache. I'm real busy. Whereas like now it's like we don't say that. It's like, would you like a massage?
Mm-hmm. But actually mean it, right?
And actually
It's
mean it.
like,
And like I'm not
yeah,
doing, and this is a whole different topic, but I'm not doing the massage to get sex.
yeah,
I'm doing the massage because I want to touch you
yeah.
and I would like to give you a massage
Mm-hmm.
for like in service. And I'm not looking for it to be a stepping stone
Mm-hmm.
to penetration. It can be, this is where it gets a bit confusing because it can be a stepping stone for more pleasure,
Mm-hmm.
but we just have to see how it feels when we get there.
Intention is so powerful,
Yeah.
right? It's like that's where it becomes more aligned, because if your intention is, as you said, enjoying touching me, enjoying being in service, and enjoying the connection, then you can also have the intention to have pleasure together.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, that can lead to other places. However, if it's so felt in a woman's body when there is no pressure coming from
Yeah.
their male partner, because, or the partner that and kind of embodies more of this direction usually, right? More of this like yang, yes, I want to have this thing with you. So it just relaxes me so much when I feel that you have desire for me,
Mm-hmm.
but it's contained.
Yeah.
It's not like this immature of like, oh, I need to
Yeah.
get this one thing and I'm gonna do the things I need to do to get her there, almost like a cooking recipe.
Yeah.
Oh, touch her there, touch her there. She
Yeah.
liked that last week.
Bing bang bang.
And then expecting, almost like you can press some buttons on the body
Yeah.
and then you get a result.
Yeah.
It's like, no. And it can be super unconscious. It doesn't even have to be a conscious thought of like, oh, I'm gonna do this, this, and this, so I get that. But when that's part of the intention and there is this agenda, a lot of bodies shut down. Like,
For sure.
a lot of partners that experience that
Mm-hmm.
are just not going to open or surrender.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, I think there's something to do with like the physicality of a raging hard on. You know.
Can you elaborate?
Well, it's just it's a penetrative thing.
Yeah.
You know, and
And there is a sense of urgency because
it's
happening now. Look at it.
It's very invasive. So if you're at the receiving end of a penetrative, invasive thing, then it's kind of like a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like the conditions have to be right, because you're essentially going inside of someone, which is like, when you just think about it, just when you say it, going inside of someone, it's like, whoa.
Yeah.
It's like, no,
This is a big deal.
it's a big deal.
Yeah.
You're not just like shaking hands with someone.
Yeah.
It's like, wow. And so, yeah. And I think with guys, it's interesting. Like the sexual energy is very powerful, and it's very intoxicating.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a sense of urgency to it with men as well. It's because we can do it. This is the thing that I always find interesting. It's like the male sexual arousal apparatus, it can handle a lot. It can have sex really fast, really hard, really intense. And because it can do that, I think a lot of things have like been built around that. The sexual narrative has been built around that and geared towards almost promoting that as like the status quo. And so for a lot of guys, it's the go-to mechanism of how to engage.
Yeah.
And it's also the go-to mechanism to how to self-pleasure quite fast and quite like, you're getting it done. Whereas, it doesn't have to be that way, does it?
Yeah.
Because guys can also go really slow. And, we've kind of been moved along this conveyor belt of how to experience sexuality, that when our own sexual pleasure, that when we get to a certain age, we realize we've only engaged with our lingam, our penis, in a really quite intense way.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, when we engage in our partners, we're already at this peak, we're already used to this peak intensity that
Mm.
to go slower takes a lot of work
Mm.
of changing the conditioning in our brain to realize, wow, we can go slower. Then we go slower, we might be like, oh, I'm not feeling that much. I need to go faster to feel. I need to turn up the energy to feel more, to race to that finish line, to jump off that cliff and orgasm. And the interesting thing about it is then when you remove the ejaculatory orgasm off the table for a man being involved in intimacy, you realize you don't need to go fast at all.
Yeah.
Because you can just slow the rite down because you don't want an orgasm. You don't want to ejaculate.
Yeah.
So what's the point of going fast? So then you can navigate going slow. And I find with us, me changing how I engaged in sex, penetrative sex especially,
Mm.
by going slower, more without ejaculatory purpose, really helped us to connect more and really helped to be more, to have more sex basically.
Yeah.
Let's
100%.
just call it how it is, to have more,
Yeah.
which is which is great.
100%. Yeah, it's kind of like meeting in the middle, rather
Yeah.
than women trying to catch up
Yeah.
really intensely to this kind of very narrow-minded idea of male sexuality. It's like you're co-creating something that is really beautiful for both
Yeah.
bodies and both partners.
And that's where it comes down to it. There's the whole, you can talk about energy, you can talk about polarity, you can talk about lots of different things, but you can also just be biological in terms of how things work. Because like a man can go that fast, but a man can easily go that slow with no problem at all.
Yeah.
Whereas a female body person most of the time can't necessarily just go that fast. It just
Yeah.
doesn't work like that.
Unless she has been cultivating that level of sexual energy for a week or a whole day with a partner, right? So I think that's also something where one aspect is this sexual narrative and like equality and really co-creating. The other thing is also that I had to create more moments of pleasure for myself.
Yes.
And more moments of meditation with pleasure to have a more enjoyable sex life. So there's also a part where I took that responsibility of saying like, hey, I don't actually know what I want.
Yeah.
I don't actually really know what I enjoy. I find it really hard to be present and not think about stuff. Hence, having all this like, oh, I need to provide, like this thought spiral even of obligation. It is just another thought spiral, right? Like whatever topic it is. So how can I be present in my body and really feel more pleasure? And how can I cultivate this yin arousal to the point that I can have this?
Yes. Yeah.
And that's where tantric practices and Taoist practices come in. And I find it really interesting in the kind of sex positive conversation with Emily Nagasaki's book, for example.
Yeah.
I don't really see an emphasis on that at all. It's all very much like, oh, what kind of moment have you and feeling do you have to have desire? And if you've been doing care work, you might not be in the right mood for this or that. So how can you get yourself? Where in reality, you can do a practice that gets like that will create a desire that's so strong that most of that stuff won't matter.
Yeah.
So I find that's a very different, I'm just fascinated how there's so different approaches.
Yeah.
And for me, the one that I've experienced firsthand, and I see it in my clients as well, is that you can actively choose to cultivate sexual energy.
Yeah.
And it is not only to use it in your relationship to have this magical, lasting, beautiful connection with your partner, which is obviously epic, but you can also use it to feel really good about yourself and
Yeah,
confident
100%.
and attract the things that you desire because, you know, you are glowing from the inside out. So
Well, that,
yeah, I just think this is
yeah.
it's such a big deal. I wish for everyone to know about this, basically.
Yeah, and that's the thing, because it's kind of redefining this sexual energy thing. Because when I talk to most people, like, yeah, I work within sexuality, helping with men, you work with women. It's like, it's still quite edgy.
Mm-hmm.
It's still based in a lot of shame, and
Mm-hmm.
that's just the way it is, unfortunately. And working towards removing that, which is great, and a lot of people are, which is also fantastic. But it's just this idea of then when you kind of say it differently, like, hey, there's this energy inside you and it's super creative. It's where you come from, and it's got a lot of energy that can be utilized for making babies, for having pleasure, for being an artist, for mental clarity, also for health benefits, also just for feeling good, feeling balanced, feeling connected. And you're like, okay. And then when you pitch it like that, it's like, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah.
However, there's quite a lot of shame around it.
And it has a tendency to unearth your bullshit.
Yeah.
So that's another thing I want to mention. When the honeymoon period is over, because there is sexual energy exchanged, in an esoteric sense, there is a karmic bond. So there is, in that sense, a connection between our wounds and the patterns that we act out.
Mm-hmm.
And when the honeymoon phase is over, we start to trigger each other in a relationship more and more with the things that have already been there anyway,
Yeah.
right? The karma, the baggage. So here we can choose, right? We can start blaming the other person for how we feel. And, that's human. And that's usually our first ego response is, what we do. And then we can choose to look at that and be like, well, if I just blame my partner for the type of job he does that doesn't do this for me, maybe he's away too many hours, or maybe it's not enough money, or I blame him for the hobby he has, which I thought was cute before, because he chooses to sit on his computer over going to the park with me, or I blame him for whatever, right? Like,
Are you blaming me right now?
I'm so sorry. So there's a lot of
It's my
things.
hobby, all right? It's my passion. God.
So there's so many things that when we feel like when we feel uncomfortable emotions, it's so easy just to be like, oh yeah, he's doing this, she's doing that. And this is where it gets really powerful, because we have this karmic situation, we have the sexual bond, the sexual energy exchange that brought all these patterns more to the surface, because I'm not pissed off about my neighbor or my other friend having the same hobby or doing the same things, right? I'm
Yeah.
only pissed off with my partner that I have sexual connection with.
Yeah.
So, or when you've been friends, when you've had an acquaintance, once has been sex, emotions are so much more raw.
Yeah.
It's like suddenly it matters if this person calls.
100%.
Last week it didn't.
Yeah.
But after there was a sexual connection, there is just so much more potential for our wounds to get activated.
Yeah.
That being said, we can then transform these things because they've been brought out of the basement.
Yeah.
That's the shadow work that sexual energy exchange asks us to do constantly. So here's a big, big opportunity for a couple to really ride.
Yes. Yeah. To really grow together.
To really grow, because it's all been pulled out of the basement.
Yeah, it's a big revealer, isn't it? It's gonna strip you. It's gonna strip your skin off.
And that's where we can take full responsibility for our shit, right? It's like,
Yeah.
Again, I love therapy for that. I love somatic therapy. And I love working through themes and triggers and things like that in the safety of a session. And for me, I had a lot of relational trauma in my life, so that was very helpful to then afterwards be able to go very clearly to you, and instead of saying, I think it's really boring that you're sitting on the computer in the evenings because what the fuck are you even doing there? I can say, hey, I feel a little lost and I need connection. and I don't even know right now what I want to do with you, and I feel a little embarrassed that I want you to have playtime with me. Like maybe I feel like a 5-year-old, play with me. Um, and that's all the things I'm feeling, And from there we can create something really beautiful.
Yeah.
If I would have stayed in stage 1 of my trigger, which is like, you're not giving me attention because you're
Yeah.
using your bloody computer, this or that. As a couple, we could have never gone there. So vulnerability and the safety to be really
Yeah.
vulnerable
Yeah.
is so related to the spark.
Yeah.
Because when we blame our partners for the stuff we feel, sparks dying.
Yeah, so that really touches on it. It's the communication element, it's the vulnerability element. It's the ability to be courageous enough to say something that's could be painful for the other person. It is already painful for you, but to put it out there and trust the relationship, trust that
Yeah.
our relationship is strong enough to hold it.
Yeah.
And that's the amazing thing, because when you're looking at, or people that I work with sometimes, they've been in relationships for a long time.
Yeah.
And they've got an amazing amount of connection, like foundation. Let's just call it foundation.
Yeah.
They've been together for like 8 years. That's a long time. It's a foundation. And they've already got like the existing structure to navigate these moments. But it's just how they can lean into it. How did we lean into these moments of like, okay, this sexual energy is being quite revealing
Yeah.
of our stuff that we need to go through. What did we do to like facilitate these moments where we could be edgy and vulnerable? Is there anything like, was it going to Tantra festivals? Was it going to workshops? Was it having conversations? How do we open the communication between us where we could openly talk about things like what we like in sex, what we don't like in sex, what turns us on, what turns us off, and personal like things that we need to process, enable to be more intimate.
Yeah. I think first it was like acknowledging for me that I don't know,
Yeah.
which was already really shameful.
Yeah.
I felt so much shame about the disconnection and the not knowing my body, not understanding my pleasure. Like there's so disempowering if I just hope for you or another partner in the past to know how to push a button so I could feel something, right? It's like, it's my body. So I had to start with myself, with getting to know my own body, because how do I tell you what I want when I don't know?
Exactly. Yeah. And it goes the other way around. It's like, oh, I feel like I'm not fulfilled. What do I want? I don't really know. Then it's like, we need to figure that out first.
Yeah.
And then you need to ask for it, or, put it out there. I like the idea of putting stuff out there. It doesn't have to be like a demand. Demands aren't very, very good.
And you went on a quest of like containing your sexual energy, as you were saying in the beginning, right?
Yeah.
So volatile of like, boom, I'm aroused right now and
Yeah.
I can go for it. It's like, that's a man's job, And I'm so glad
Man's job for what? What's my job?
to learn to contain this fire.
Yeah, I think the idea of it is to learn to contain the fire to ensure a safe environment for everyone to play.
Yeah.
Because, if you're just using the metaphor of the fire, it's like, fires are great,
Yeah,
but they can also burn your fucking house down.
exactly. And it
And,
happens all the time.
yeah, it happens a lot,
And-
where it's very volatile.
Yeah.
And, it's really important, especially as the man who has a lingam and is a penis and is a penetrative and invasive object of massive potential to heal, to procreate, to give pleasure, but also has big potential to cause, yeah, a lot of pain and suffering. So
Yes.
this kind of, yeah, fire, it's important for a man to regulate it. It's not extinguishing the fire. No. It's shaping the fire.
It's like the fire can even be bigger, but
It can be
you
bigger.
are
Can
you
you
in
handle it?
control
Can
of
you
your own
hold it?
fire? Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Can
it's
you be
very
so attuned to be engaged in an interaction with another person where you can see minute real-time differences of how they're experiencing the situation, and you can pick up on that and then instantly react with your own body to ensure that it changes the direction in which the person is going on. And that's attunement, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's maturity as well
Yeah.
in male sexuality, because, you know, most teenagers do not know how to control their fire, you know?
No.
It's like, and when you're a grown man and you're interacting with the women, the body, even without words, without anything, just the animal bodies know instantaneously.
Yeah.
A woman knows instantaneously if a man is consumed by his own desire, or if he's level-headed, observing his desire and still in connection with this woman, right? And the nervous system reacts instantaneously, because if
Well, it already knows before.
yeah,
Well, not before, but like
and
before your brain knows.
and so many women
Yeah.
like say it really clearly. They're like, oh, when he gets really aroused, I just lose him. There's no
Yeah.
connection. He just goes for the orgasm, and I don't really, there's no heart connection in that moment. It's just the strong desire. And yeah, I think it's fascinating to me that so many of my female clients are so open to learning about their body, about their pleasure, to healing, any kind of baggage they've come or brought into a relationship, even just the relationship with themselves. Like, they're so open to naming the problem of like, yeah, I don't really feel sensual or confident in my sexuality, or I feel super disconnected.
Yeah.
And then their partners, almost 90% of the time, kind of feel like it's hasn't really much to do with them.
Yeah, that's because it's we're operating within the patriarchal system, especially within the sexual narrative. And going back to what you said before, the women think that they're broken, think that it's their problem, and therefore their initiative to fix it. And it's also going back to the expectation that it's the woman's responsibility to keep the sexual house together,
Yeah.
where the man is just there,
The peacekeepers.
the peacekeeper, where in the patriarchal system of the sexual narrative, a man's doing everything fine.
Yeah.
He's showing up with his heart on, and that's it.
Job done. Yeah.
Job done. And it's his, and there, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of men are at the receiving end negatively to this situation as well.
And
So
they don't want to be that man
and don't
so
want to
badly.
be that
so
man.
they're
And
kind of lost as well.
and there's a lot of men that don't want to be this like like machoistic kind of guy reaping the benefits of the patriarchal system. And there's a lot of so it's how are we shaping the system to mold so everyone wins. It's like bringing harmony to a disequilibrium that can be rectified. And I think that's where Tantra, Taoist practices, and
Conscious
sexuality and bringing relationships together.
Yeah.
I want to move to this point, and you said it before, and I think it's really good because we're still on this keeping the fire burning kind of idea. And you said a lot about cultivation. And what I like to think about is that, and I mentioned it earlier, is we can't just view sex as this or intimacy, let's call it intimacy. We can't view it as this isolated thing that happens in the bedroom. It's a thing that bleeds into all aspects of your life,
Yeah.
especially with your partner. And if we're viewing our intimacy as love, love is not like a noun, it's like a verb. You have to do stuff for it. It's an action. And, a lot of things that are keeping the intimacy, the wood, and you said it as well, bringing wood to the fire. How am I bringing this wood to the fire to keep it burning?
Yeah.
And it's these actions, small actions as well, that help, the way I see it, that help you feel appreciated, seen, and heard. And I feel that these things are real good lubricants for more intimate moments. And this can happen 24/7.
Yeah.
And that's like, we're already you mentioned it before, we're already warming up
Yeah.
the bath, the water
Yeah.
of your arousal and my arousal as well.
Yeah.
And so like mine, I suppose this is kind of love languages kind of ideas, but like how are we creating the situation where intimacy is just constantly there, like bubbling, and
Yeah.
we can just like when it spills into more connected desire, it just happens quite easily. Is that something that's there for you, or would you agree with that, disagree with that?
Yeah, I think when it comes to female arousal, it's a lot about safety. So being seen and heard, in our emotional expression is emotional safety, right?
Yeah.
So if a man can handle us falling apart, he is a really safe person to have sex with.
Yeah.
Because basically, if I want to
Great.
have amazing sexual connection with you, I want to fall apart.
Yes.
You know, I want to be in such a deep surrender that I'm just like, my whole body is open and I'm like not thinking about anything. I'm letting go of holding things together.
Yeah.
And if I make that choice to let go of holding myself together and literally, you know, let me take and allow you to take me, then I need to be safe to fall apart.
Yeah.
Because I might encounter emotions and I might encounter uncomfortable emotions, you know?
Yeah.
So if I start crying or if I start suddenly feeling angry, like that needs to be totally okay
Yeah. Yeah.
and held by you.
Yeah. Held's the important thing, because it's not my job to put you back together again.
No, but like you need to be able to just see that energy for what it is and be like, wow,
Yeah.
there's strong passion,
To
there's
witness.
strong fire, right? So
Yeah.
fire of sexual energy and the fire of emotions, you know, they are made of the same cloth.
Yeah.
So if I allow myself to be primal and raw and real and authentic and like not care about if I look pretty, but express myself sexually with you, you know, from this place of just being transparent before you,
Yeah.
then I can only do that if I know that you can see me and accept me and love me in all my expressions,
Yeah.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
don't take it personal, you know, and don't be like, oh my God, she's crying, I did something wrong, but just be like, hey, what do you need right now?
Mm-hmm.
Or just literally see me and your energy can, you know, again, it's a nervous system thing, it's an animal body thing. Like if you're not phased
Mm-hmm.
by my expression in that moment as I fall apart, you know, I can express my grief and heal it in that moment. And then the lovemaking can even continue even deeper, even more connected, even greater love. And
Yeah.
often this is an end destination. I heard this so many times of people being like, oh, I start crying before orgasm or after orgasm. And it's just this like whole kills the vibe, you know? And it's like, I wish these couples knew that that's actually when the vibe really gets even better.
Yes. Crank it up.
This is like
Yeah.
you touched upon your pain and your emotions in a moment of love and connection.
Yeah.
When else do you want to feel your grief? You know, than when you're held in an embrace with the most important person, you know.
Yeah. It's very deep, very
Yeah.
raw,
Yeah.
very yeah, it's like the definition
So
of
intimate.
intimate.
It's
Definition
so
of
intimate.
intimacy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like how can you ask for more intimacy and not want these like really deep expressions of the soul,
Yeah.
like these really like deep emotional
So it's
moments
kind of like when
together.
you're thinking about, let's just say that this relationship that comes to us and says like, oh, we want more love life. And so a big component of that is saying like, well, how ready are you to be vulnerable with each other?
You want more fire, can you take the whole lot?
Yeah. And that's, again, it's just like not separating it. It's not like having this like fantasy of like what it is and what it should be and what I should be doing. It's like bringing it closer to the core of the existence of what the relationship is and what the relationship can be.
Yeah.
Bringing it right into to the center of like the the temple and realizing to really bring it up, you need to incorporate everything, which is like the vulnerability, the passion, the tears, you name it, all the good stuff, all the stuff that just creates a full spectrum of human experience.
Yeah. So if we sum it up, how did we keep the spark in 10 years? It's healing our own stuff, cultivating sexual energy,
Cultivating it.
staying open to seeing the triggers within the relationship as opportunity for growth.
Yeah, and also being open to change.
Yes.
I remember you being like, I prefer it if you do this instead of doing that, specifically talking about sex. And first I was like, whoa. And then I processed it like within a few minutes, and I was like, thank you for letting me know. It's a great opportunity for me to be better. And sometimes there's a big resistance for people to change, especially when it comes to sex. It's uncomfortable. And I think that's part of dealing with the baggage. Also redefining what intimacy and what sex is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where did we go? I kind of sidetracked you. I liked summing it up. Let's sum it up again. Sum it up again for me, please. I won't jump in.
So it was, being open to looking at our own stuff when we're in a moment of blame or trigger. Seeking help with that if needed.
Yeah.
In my case, that was healing relational trauma, healing some sexual trauma that was in my body. Obviously, we do that in a couple, but our partners are not our therapists. Then cultivating sexual energy, because if you want to live a sparkly life, you want, basically what I'm hearing is, I want to feel my life force. I want to feel my sexual energy.
Yeah.
So you can take full control of that, whether you're in a relationship or single, which is great news. And you've been mentioning looking at societal conditioning, right? We bring the conditioning from our families or partnerships.
Everywhere.
But then we also have this like big narrative that makes it actually quite hard for a long-term relationship to feel like they're doing great, because when they compare themselves to the lovers in the Hollywood movie, they're like, oh, that's not like us whatsoever. So here must be something wrong in this relationship, because I never drop my eggs in the kitchen and just like want to shag on the sofa. So maybe I need a different relationship because this one's not sparkly.
Yeah.
Right? So also redefining.
Yeah. And just to add to that as well is just realizing that every relationship is unique. Like our relationship is unique. And I'm not saying that as like cheesy. It's just like I am me and you are you and we are together. And that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world, and your relation.
But how does that relate to the spark?
The spark is going back into the societal norms of intimacy, is finding, you have to, instead of being like how to be a better partner in general, it's like how to be a better lover. It's like, how can I be a better lover for my partner?
Yes. So that's the co-creation element.
That's the co-creation. And that's like, how do you keep the spark alive? It's kind of like this idea that there's not really a go-to template. It's like actually figuring out what is going to keep our spark alive, because it's its own thing. And realizing that, you might love me sucking your toes, and that's a big thing for you. It could be, hypothetically. And to keep the spark alive, I might have to do that.
If you enjoy it, though.
If I enjoy it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just being that, realizing that relationship is just unique within itself.
Yeah.
And yeah. Should we end it with sucking toes?
I think that's a good end, yeah.
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 Well, thank you.
Pleasure.
And until next time.
Bye.
Bye.